Shiki got completely destroyed by Sumail. I was looking at the CS a few minutes in. He did get the first blood, right? That's what we were talking about. The first blood was mid, because I didn't see that one.
I think so.
Yeah.
And he had like 15-7 CS against 2-1, which should never happen in any matchup generally, unless it's like super one-sided. But maybe Shiki, I don't know if he was just had a bad game or if he's not very comfortable in Bloodseeker. He might have played it earlier in the tournament, but maybe a different matchup. Sumail, known to be a hyper-aggressive player. It's a hero that you can really abuse in the mid lane, the Bloodseeker. If you get ahead and he wants to get in for the last hit with Blood Rage on because he needs to get his health back, you catch him off guard with a stun, you blow him up with a combo, and maybe that's how he got the first blood. So that's a big part of it for me. In addition, it's something that's very hard to assess whenever you're watching a game with techies. You don't hear the team communication, so you don't know how, like, you might feel like your hand is forced and that you have to play a completely different game in terms of movements, because when we looked at it from our perspective, it seemed like the techies didn't do that much.
Right.
But it's very difficult to measure. Like, how do they mentally feel like they have to? How do they move around the map? Do they feel like they can't farm here and there? Some of their cores didn't get so big. Maybe they would have farmed like 15-20% more if they weren't scared of mines. Who knows? So.
Right. There's definitely has kind of an outside factor, pressure, that you can't always assess just because there aren't kills or explosives going off all the time on the map.
There were two main things for me. Firstly was the Roshan control. The Roshan just died super easily. It was like either like a medallion plus a Clinks, or like a sigil plus Clinks, or Clinks plus mines. There was always something there that was Clinks plus something else, and they just got 3 straight Roshans in a row. And that really kind of pulled them ahead. And on top of that, they actually wanted CDEC to pick BKB once I considered the draft as a whole, because they had so many anti-BKB things. They had Walrus Punch, they had a Blink on Tusk to stun lock him so he couldn't BKB, they had an Axlina, they had a Clinks with massive amounts of physical damage, they had Weave, and they had Techies with landmines and Suicide. That was like as anti-BKB as you can get for a lineup. So they just let him farm, kind of play keep away so they can't snowball with five heroes, just, kind of let them farm, and then once they get their BKBs, they're just wasting 4,000 gold, which you can just easily counter with a Ags Lina, which is 4,200 gold.
Okay. Dakota, what about you? How'd you view this game?
I thought it was funny how we ends up playing techies, and we had a giggle how he's the guy who put on Twitter that he wanted a petition to remove techies from the game, and now he's playing it, and, I agree pretty much what these handsome gentlemen said. It's they had a good, strong start because of their first blood onto the Bloodseeker. It forced out some, rotations from the CDEC side. Already put them in that kind of uncomfortable standard, more defensive, going for the BKBs. And as Ben said, those weren't really viable at the end, which is how much they could still control them. And then by the end of the game, it felt like they were able to corral CDEC like little sheep back into their base, away from the Roche pit. They got what they wanted. I don't know how much experience CDEC has going against the techies. That can set a mentality for a team where you don't really know what happens after you go out the front door of your base. You don't know if there's a stasis you might accidentally walk to and your BKB is not ready to go, and that can get in your head quite a bit.
If they had TA 4th pick instead of the Visage, I think it would have been way different, because you can't snowball as a Lina versus a TA. It's just really difficult unless you have outside help, and on top of that, you can just run into mines. And you're not going to die.
Let's talk a little bit more about that as we look at one of the highlights from this game, one of the mid-game fights coming up between these two teams. What do you think the logic was for trying to save that TA? Do you think maybe CDEC just never had that on their radar, or they were trying to wait until the very last pick for their mid?
It's difficult to say. From our perspective, TA would have been a great pick in this game as the 4th pick.
Right.
They might have, sometimes in the draft you might overthink and you think of multiple things at once, and then all of a sudden something that might be fairly obvious doesn't come to your mind because you're thinking too far ahead, or you're making it more difficult than it has to be.
Yeah.
Time you replace one hero with another, it makes a completely different game. But the reason it's so important in this game is that instead of Sumail snowballing and owning mid, he would have, if Shiki plays well, drawn at best, TA wins against Lina in top tier Dota. That's just how it is, unless you really make a big mistake. And come mid game in this game, because Bloodseeker is so far behind, he can never go aggressively with confidence. As Ben said, even with BKB, he just gets blown up by physical damage. So a hero like TA, who in this game could maybe, even if she gets BKB, she can still ignore a lot of the physical damage sources. Like, you could tank 6 attacks from clicks without taking damage, or was it in refractions 7? I can't remember number of instances. It's been changed a couple times.
I mean, it's also good versus Lina. It's also good at taking Roche, which I think were their main issues.
it would just have been really, really solid for a lot of purposes in this game. And to be honest, that seemed like the weakness in their draft was just that the mid lane just went horribly.
Yeah,
wrong.
what can Bloodseeker do versus that lineup, honestly? Like, you
Nothing.
pretty much can't use your first skill, or you're just going to die instantly.
Yeah, and you're picking it into a Dazzle. Dazzle's good at sustaining your lane, so he doesn't get that advantage of other lanes, getting weak and wounded, and him being able to use that advantage. PBD's there to be the medic and keep him boosted up. So, yeah, pretty much a struggle at the start. Maybe they were thrown off a bit from EG opening up with the Lina and couldn't really identify if it was going to be the Sumo hero, and they wanted to wait it out a bit. I don't know.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, we considered those options. You bring up a good point with the Dazzle, of course, that it's going to affect how that lane plays out. We have another highlight from that game. As we take a look at that, let's talk a little bit about, techies, if you're not used to playing it, are you afraid of it coming out 2 times in a row? Because you're just not confident playing against the hero.
I think they might ban it in the second phase if there's a Tusk pick now, but else,
Okay.
I think they don't. Like, even though, honestly, CDEC did a pretty good job in the early game, not letting techies take over the map. Like, we've seen other teams play against Tusk techies, and it just seems like every time Suicide is up, they find a kill with Snowball. But it happened maybe twice in this game, in the early game. One time on aggressive top, and there might have been one gank mid that was successful on Bloodseeker. I can't remember for sure, but it wasn't really that impactful. Still, it's what propels techies into the game. They countered his early mines bottom instantly with a sentry. They identified where Aoi was and that he was placing the mines. If he doesn't get the couple of setups with Suicide Squad attack, you could look at a really, really useless techies in the first 10 to 15 minutes. So, without the Tusk, I generally don't really see many teams picking the hero this tournament, honestly.
Okay.
It's just so important.
All right, Dakota, would you agree that if the Tusk is on, the threat really isn't there unless it's like a super pocket pick for certain teams?
Yeah, I don't think they'll go as far as to ban like a Tusk in round 1. I think it would be too risky to allow one of those bigger, badder heroes on through. But I agree with Sin. If it is going to be picked up early from like EG, let's say, they might ban it second round. But PPD has made it known. I know in his draft analysis for last year, he said that he doesn't like to go with the same draft twice, even if it works. But I have also seen him pick same drafts twice since then. So it's hard to say. He could say that to just try to, in case any opponents are watching out there, and he'll actually pick it up twice. We'll have to see, though. But I would wager we're not going to see techies again here.
Okay, so going forward, EG having won that one map, they're much safer now. I believe pretty much safe for top 2. I don't think they have much of a chance of dropping down to the third place seed right now in Group B. Yeah, maybe even impossible. So they've got to feel a lot better now, less pressure. That's pretty much going to wrap up the group stages for them as we go into the second game between these two teams. CDIC, on the other hand, also not feeling too bad. But if EG 2-0s, do they catch up? No. Okay, we're gonna have
they
to
definitely do need to 2-0 CDEC if they want to get to number 1.
If EG 2-0,
oh right, and then it's and then
it's in
they have
CDEC's
to
hands.
wait. Right, it's in CDEC's hand because CDEC has another match. Right,
It's pretty
Talked
good
about this
actually.
earlier.
If they 2-0 CDEC, they will have 13 points and CDEC has 12, which means CDEC have to 2-0 because if they draw, they lose on heads up, and that would mean EG would still take the first place. So it forces them into a position where they have to 2-0, and they have to do it right after coming from a loss, which is even better, I think, for EG. So
Yeah, and
they have something to
and
play
we
for in
talked
this game,
about
that's
how that could be a big difference for EG. Maybe you just don't want to play against Cloud9. You want to have that choice, playing against Complexity, rather than leaving that up into CDEC's hands once we go into that bracket stage. So EG is still going to put a lot of emphasis, hopefully, onto Game 2, and CDEC at the same time. You want to secure that first place spot just here and there. You don't want to have to wait until the next match and go in with an unknown, knowing that your fate and your kind of rival's fate is decided by your next match. We do have a quick update. It sounds like MVP Hot 6 has won their first game out of 4 today, so the dream is still alive for MVP Hot 6. These updates coming in, they're very exciting.
The last 3 days they were just pretending.
They've had a rough run in the last 3 days.
It's been weird, right? Because I think it was on day 1 or after day 1 or very early in day 2. I said the MVP team that has the highest chance of making top 8 is Hot 6.
Yeah,
because they actually played really well on day 1, but they lost most of their games. And then it just seemed like the way they analyzed their games and the way they tried to adapt just totally didn't work. Like they picked way too much early game. They didn't have mechanics or built-in things in their draft to end the games. Whereas MVP Phoenix just did a better job with that. But maybe they're back on track now.
We'll find out by the end of the day. The draft for Game 2 on our stream is ready. Again, it is CDEC versus EG. EG trying to keep the hope alive, or the chance alive, of being first in Group B, and CDEC just trying to secure it right here and now. And the first ban's going through. Let's see, you're going to be banned out by EG in the first phase.
Blue Pony Man is still there.
Yep.
Blue Pony Man is still there.
This is interesting. Like
Ban
we
Blue
owned
Pony
your
Man.
Bloodseeker last game. It was too easy. We won't give it to you again.
I love just making up more reasons and logic behind EG's traps.
I really don't know what the idea is behind this. Maybe it's just to set it for the Queen of Pain. Maybe they don't like playing against Bloodseeker with Quab. Although, as we've talked about previously, if you do max range blink and move very quickly, you don't take rupture
Well,
damage.
Bloodseeker can actually win versus Quab in lane. I think versus Lina it's much more difficult because she has like significantly better burst as well as longer range. But with versus Queen of Pain, all you need to do is just outlast it during the poison, which is pretty easy because Quab's not going to blink on you that early.
Now, CDEC, is Tusk a concern here? Do you take it away? Is CDEC confident in them picking the Tusk over EG?
I really like how they played with a Shaker last game. Yeah. I think that's really good for them. Tusk, well, the thing about the Tusk is you don't have to waste a ban on techies later, because if you don't take it now, it's very likely that Evil Genius is going to take it, and then you have to waste another ban in the future. So it's definitely more their style for the Tusk Undying.
Back to CDEC basics. This
That's
is
true.
what they played in the wild card. I think
true.
so. What was it? They played like Tusk Undying, and we were criticizing them for using it too much, the Undying and the aggressive dual lane, and they started teams started figuring them out and countering it.
Right.
But now that they lost the first game against EG, they do go back to their core strategy, if you will, of even the Chinese qualifiers. They also played aggressive dual lane Undying with Dazzle, I think, mostly in that tournament.
EG get the DAC duo, Queen of Pain, Shadow Fiend.
Yeah. And, I mean, generally we've seen kind of teams being 50-50 on whether you really prioritize that SF or not on Radiant, but if you can secure both of those, doesn't sound like a bad idea at all.
Now they just need some way to back them up a bit, whether it be a Dazzle or the Earthshaker. If it somehow makes it through this ban phase, I'm sure that'd be ideal for EG.
That's the thing CDEC can do now, is that EG have just picked 2 cores into Tusk Undying, so now they can ban really strong lane supports and just look to abuse this to the maximum potential.
I mean, they can just safe lane Quab though. I don't think Tusk Undying can really take advantage of that at all.
That's true. I guess. So how does Undying match up 1-on-1 against Quab if they want to roam the Tusk? I guess he loses, but doesn't get destroyed. So that's a possibility. Like if EG don't get their key defensive supports, of course, PPD has a big array of them, but there are just some of them that seem just flat out better in this metagame. I guess Dazzle is the one to highlight, and maybe they can roam the Tusk on mid. There's the first defensive support ban, the Earthshaker.
Still a Dazzle and a Wyvern.
Yes.
That would have to be taken out of.
Yeah.
Wyvern is great so far. Good
Wyvern's
stuff.
great, but hasn't shown great results at TI, believe it or not. Almost pretty overpicked here. I have the stats, I don't want to reach and look at, but it's pretty abysmal. I want to say about a 23% win rate right now.
I mean, that's much lower than I thought it would be.
Yeah.
That's pretty good.
Dazzle's great, though. 53%, so I mean...
Yeah, Dazzle's definitely been on the rise. Pretty decent. I mean, anything over 50% is going to be hard to keep up.
CDEC's on Dire again. I still think TA is very nice for them. It's like it's one of those heroes that you can just like snowball in with and immediately cause a lot of havoc, and it's very difficult to focus down, especially with heroes like Shadow, Fiend, and Queen of Pain who don't do that many instances of damage really quickly. Also, again, they're on Dire. They need to do Roche. They need to prevent EG from getting it just because they're really, really good at sneaking it in, 5-man smoking, whatever it may be, to secure that.
Gonna ban the Viper away from Shiki, giving their Quap a better matchup, or their Shadow Fiend. It's just keeping their options open, I guess, for how they want to put their lanes. They don't want to end up in a situation where no matter which of their heroes they put mid, it loses.
Right.
So it's a solid ban. I think